Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Africa Update, reaching you from Trust TV studios in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And this week on the program, we'll be looking at some happenings on the continent. The DRC is still coming up again in the conversation. Just stay with us. We'll be right back. It's still Africa Update on Trust TV, and I'm your host, Chiamaka Mwafo. But before we went on that short break, I said the DRC is still in our conversation. Just yesterday, that's Friday, 25th of April, 2024, the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda signed a significant peace and economic development agreement in Washington, D.C., overseen by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, this accord aims to address the ongoing conflict in eastern DRC, where Rwandan-backed M23 rebels have been active, and to promote U.S. investment in the region's mineral-rich areas, including copper, cobalt, and lithium. The agreement is a broad declaration of principles, setting the stage for a more detailed peace accord in the coming months. Both nations have expressed interest in separate mineral deals with the United States, which is seeking to reduce reliance on Chinese-dominated mining operations. Now, in the studio with me to talk about other conversations, and this one, just a bit into it, is Ambassador Haruna Warakani. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
He's a former ECOWAS ambassador and equally a diplomat, well, likes to be called a documentalist. Now, what's your take on that Rwanda DRC agreement with America?
Well, these are some of the, would we say, hypocrisies leading Africa, generally speaking. Here you have a conflict affecting millions of people in a country, and countries outside the region or continent are busy signing deals that only favors them. America is in this mix of who is negotiating what for the so-called peace. I call it so-called peace because we await the outcomes of this agreement itself. But you can see the emphasis on America's interest being like in the forefront. So there is a bilateral agreement beside the multilateral agreement between America and the DRC, in which case mineral resources is actually the prime factor. America wants to insist that she must have a right of the rich minerals in the DRC. That's the only condition for which she is participating
in the agreement from the story. So it's basically about what I will get from you to help you have peace.
That's all. So we as Africans, sincerely, we need to start questioning some of these things and even the positioning of our leaders. What do they know? What are they capable of doing? What are they ready to do? That oath of allegiance to your country, what you signed, was about to. Can you stand by it? Can you defend the interests of your country? Here is a conflict. People are dying, and you are saying we need to sign agreements for your minerals for us to even participate or contribute anything to that peace agreement.
No, but let's move away from the American issue in it. Now, people have been trying to come together and make peace. African countries have been trying to broker a peace between these two countries, and somehow it never falls through. But here we see now agreements have been signed. Is it that we need a Western influence to agree to come to to the table?
Well, first, it must be the cause and effect that we should understand. What are the causes of these conflicts in the first place? They are not African countries. They are engineered and implanted into Africa by the same people who come around now and say, sign off this part of your sovereignty for us to guarantee you peace. They know where, how, and the nitty-gritty of those things that they have implanted to create some of these conflicts. Because when the conflicts rages on, mining is vigorously going in the background. And so whatever we are doing is just on the surface. The real issues are behind the scene. And you can see America even unashamedly is saying they are signing this agreement so that they can downplay what Chinese influences have been in the mining sector in the DRC. Which means America woke up very late and discovered that China has taken a good franchise of the mineral resources in the DRC and some other countries. And so for that matter, America now recognizes that without some of these minerals, its industrial sector at home will suffer. Therefore, to balance it up, you need to go quickly to Africa where these resources are, get hold of it, and the only way to do so is to go via conflicts and the rest of them. So these conflicts are engineered, and therefore, if we're expecting that maybe poor African countries can come together, formulate peace accords and minimize a conflict or maintain peace, is going to be a joke. You ask the question, suddenly countries like the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman,
even Kenya,
I mean, are interested in some of these conflicts. How? What is the interest? So there is much more to what we are seeing, and you see the internal conflicts within the Congo in particular has been rooted in the availability of these resources. So the resources have become a curse in a way.
All right, so apparently our riches are now becoming our problems, really, in the African continent.
Very well.
So without what we have to give, nobody wants to have anything to do with us.
Not at all. Nobody will greet you.
We're still staying with the DRC. We can see that Joseph Kabila has decided to return. Now, you know, it's a controversy, and it has ignited a quite significant and raised concerns about the nation's political stability. Now, I'm not going to go into all the intro, but in case you're asking who Joseph Kabila is, he is the former president of the DRC, served from 2001 to 2019. Wow, 18 years, and returned to the country this year after a 6-year period of self-imposed exile. Now, he arrived in Goma, a city in the eastern region controlled by the M23 rebel group, which has been accused of receiving support from Rwanda. Kabila's return has been met with skepticism, with some viewing it as an attempt to regain political influence and the ongoing conflict in the east. Now, there's so many headlines and topics to this his return. You know, some people are saying, is it a personal thing? Is it like our topic says, a comeback or a crisis catalyst? What's your take on Kabila's return onto the scene, and why now, really?
Well, Kabila's return should be expected.
Okay.
Kabila, following his father, were almost like creating a dynasty in DRC Congo, and you couldn't mention anything political in the DRC without Kabila. The family, I mean, Laurent and now Joseph. Now, you can see where he's entering or resurfacing in DRC is the area where this conflict is raging more.
Yes.
And the recent gains of the M23, which is that side of the DRC, is also synonymous with what is about to happen. The man, Kabila, I would say, literally left the country and placed Tshisekedi in a placeholder's position, knowing fully well that he is supported deeply by the West because he is, let me say, their boy. Kabila is their man, and you can see the chances of peace or a demarcation of the DRC, that is the eastern part of DRC, away from the main DRC, might still be possible because of what we are seeing. Kabila cannot just return from nowhere and from nothing and for nothing. He is coming back because there is an agenda to implement. He has been re-groomed, let me say, by the West of what needs to be done so that he can take over and give them the kind of leeway the West had all along while he was in power. Nothing more than that. So the history of DR Congo would have been just, there was a comma after Tshisekedi, and we are now continuing from where we actually stopped. So you have these difficulties of managing resources from within because the external forces are much greater than the internal cohesion that is expected for each of these countries to be self-sufficient or manage their affairs properly. And therefore, Kabila's return definitely opens a floodgate of more trouble for the DRC than solutions. Because his departure in the first place, assuming there was time for us to analyze, you would see clearly that he didn't want to leave. There had been too many negotiations, so much conflict before he finally accepted, in quotes, to go. Handing over power to Tshisekedi was not like was a willing thing, because the dynasty his father created was ongoing, and so he never ever thought he could even leave that palace. He did leave, and now he is back. He is going to get back there because Tshisekedi, unfortunately, has fallen out of favor with the West.
Okay, so I hear you, understand what you're saying. Now Kabila's returning is to come back and aid the West in being able to plow and get what they want from the land.
Yeah.
But now with this deal being signed on Friday between Rwanda and M23 and the US, is he still going to be needed?
He is. Why is he coming now? That should be the question. We need to answer before. I mean, all along he has been quiet in the background. Suddenly somebody emerges as a dark horse somewhere. How? Where was he? Could you even accuse him of being the hands behind the crisis? He's suddenly arriving. I did say here, his point of entry into the DRC Congo
matters a lot
is very, very significant.
Yes.
Yes, because for him to come right at the crux of where this crisis is at its peak, you know that something is cooking. And African leadership needs to be a little more sophisticated than what we normally see happening or playing out on the global scene. And it's quite unfortunate that crisis has become a vehicle for development for the West and destruction for us on the continent here.
Okay, so are we going to say, since he entered into Goma, are we trying to link Kabila to M23 rebels in any way?
Very well. Before he's even entered, there has been that surreptitious link between them for quite a long time. Quite a long time. So it is only things that are not perhaps in the open. But from diplomatic channels, you could see that a lot has been going behind the scene. What we see as negotiations or signing of deals are just a facade of what really goes behind the scene. And Kabila has therefore been always there as a dark horse and waiting for the appropriate time, in quotes, to land and take over what he believes is his birthright. Now,
you've mentioned it, but let's talk about the president now, the current one. What does Kabila's return mean for Tshisekedi's political, hold on the country? Because right now, even as it is with this situation, I think he's losing his grasp on the DRC every day.
Well, Tshisekedi never had a total grasp of the DRC from the day one of his election to what we are now seeing. You could also see the complexities that he has not been able to apply himself to manage the country, unfortunately. He has been in the opposition for a very long time with the belief that he knew a lot of things that ought to have been wrong with the DRC, and therefore coming to power, he should have addressed some of those things. Unfortunately, the country has remained structurally ungovernable. And the DRC's...
when you say structurally ungovernable, what do you mean exactly?
Well, you can see a whole chunk of a country is saying they are no longer even interested in the mainstream DRC. The Eastern Congo, Goma and all its enclaves or communities and the rest of them are willing to go on their own, which is most likely what we might see if Kabila is unable to get into Kinshasa itself. Then there will be maybe a parallel government somewhere with controls of those areas and a new civil war that could emerge and might be much more complex to now handle because the warlord is back and you know, while they were away out of the country, they could instigate some of these crises. Now that they are physically in the country, you will expect that much more can easily be done. And so the DRC is still waiting for more problems. Let us not expect too much of solution rapidly or whatsoever. And you see, the silence of the African Union is also of a great concern in all this mix, because as a continental body, it ought to have made much more noises, voices, or actions. Unfortunately, none of this is actually there. You leave decision-making to other interest groups that are outside the continent. Then you begin to question, why do we have a continental body that cannot intervene effectively and bring law and order to countries that are in distress? I mean, without peace and order in countries, there should be no African Union.
All right. We're going to go on a short break. When we come back, the conversation continues. Please do stay with us. Welcome back. It's still Africa Update on Trust TV. And just before the break, we were looking into DRC. First of all, the agreement signed on Friday between the DRC and Rwanda with an American influence. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was there. Of course, they made their own interests known in that agreement being signed. And of course, Joseph Kabila is back. Was his return got to do with what's taking place in the DRC? What has it returned? What does it mean? What does it pose for that country, for that region, and for the crisis taking place? Now, we're going to move to another conversation, and that's what's happened in our neighboring country here in Ghana, where the ECOWAS summit had a two-day meeting. They convened for an extraordinary summit in Ghana on April 23rd to 23 of this year to address the formal withdrawal of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso from the bloc. Now, the meeting coincided with the launch of the ECOWAS 50th anniversary celebration, underscoring a pivotal moment for regional unity and integration. Now, key highlights from the summit was the withdrawal discussion. Delegates focused on the modalities and implications of the three countries' exit, particularly concerning ECOWAS institutions operating within their borders. Anniversary celebrations. The summit marked the official launch of the ECOWAS 50th anniversary, celebrating its founding on May 28, 1975 in Lagos, Nigeria. Diplomatic outreach. President John Dramani Mahama extended invitations to the military-led governments of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger to attend the summit, aiming to foster dialogue and regional cohesion despite recent political tensions. And of course, in a move to strengthen regional bonds, Ghana announced a scholarship program for 1,000 students across the ECOWAS sub-region. Now, Mahama has said, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, come on board, let's have a conversation, let's see what's going on, how do we address this? The ECOWAS summit mostly was because of these three Sahel states. What's your take on that whole meeting?
Well, let's say an extraordinary summit, a special summit, just to address the exit of these countries. You could see how important this move had been for ECOWAS as a regional bloc. The departure of these countries marked a significant change in the trajectory of development in the last 50 years. You cannot be marking 50 years and also celebrating a failure kind of setting. And so for John Mahama, the president of Ghana, he has been quite exciting to say, because even before his inauguration, you could see the initiatives he launched in visiting these countries in his personal capacity as John Dramani Mahama. And having also become president, has also visited these countries, trying to convince them, one, to come back, two, if coming back is impossible now, maybe a working relationship between the two blocs, let's say today. And yes, there was need for ECOWAS to come together at the summit level to now look at what else can we do, because we are, I mean, the organization is really in a quagmire, let's say it. It is in a quagmire because for three contiguous countries to pull out and say, we are no longer interested in your organization. First is a diplomatic slap. Second, technically, economically, politically, militarily, it's a big, big blow. So all efforts, plenty of efforts have been going on quietly in diplomatic circles to ensure that this departure is reversed. That is the plank of this summit meeting. And we have to wait and see what the outcomes of this are. Now you can see instructively the invitation for them to attend this summit is also another way to say, okay, we disagree as family members, but we can still have some side talks. Good. However, you can see how the response has been. And these countries are truly determined to go. They are very, very determined to go, and they are beginning to see the reasons why they must go, and you know, effect their own change, exercise their sovereignty over their resources and governance of their country in the way it should be. The recent announcement of Niger, for instance, of dropping the French language as a national language and adopting Hausa is significant. Very, very significant.
But you could still adopt Hausa and still be part of the ECOWAS.
Well, yes, it should have been. It should have been for so many countries actually across the region, because truly we cannot be a regional body and speaking only in foreign languages. It wasn't really right. Now, it has an additional burden, because now if you bring in Hausa as an additional official language for ECOWAS, it means a lot of changes need to take place. The translation and interpretation department, for instance, needs to be expanded. You need to start producing documents in Hausa language. You need to
for member countries who have Hausa as their official language.
No, not just for it. It means for everybody, because the translators and interpreters need to come and translate from Hausa to either Portuguese, English, or French. No. So it complicates the workings of ECOWAS itself. You see, when, for instance, Mauritania was there, Arabic was also an official language of ECOWAS. And we know the difficulties we had with that setting. You had to recruit Arab-speaking interpreters,
translators. Right, so basically, if Niger had still been part of the ECOWAS, the ECOWAS would have had to hire Hausa speakers to now come and be translators.
Translators and interpreters. There are two levels. There are audio translators.
And make Hausa an official language of the ECOWAS as well.
Well, once it becomes an official language, it means you have to recruit, create a new department, even expand even the meeting rooms, because the cubicles meant for each language, Portuguese, French, and English, will need to now have a Hausa cubicle. So, I mean, all these systems, the technology and what have you, needs to be adjusted appropriately. So it's not just like yes or no. No.
Okay.
It requires a lot of more.
Okay, now, so one of the issues that was discussed at that summit really was the fact that we have ECOWAS institutions in these three countries that have exited. Now, how does this exit, how does it impact their work and, you know, what they're doing in those countries? Well,
these are some of the nitty-gritty of some of these exits, let's say. First and foremost, there are institutions in these countries that are serving some specific interests. They are citizens of these countries, including the countries that have exited, which means they cease to be staff of these institutions. And for that reason, you begin to have a lot of confusion. At the headquarters, you have citizens of these AES countries that need to leave ECOWAS. And the processes of departure in diplomatic circles means a lot of complexities, movement of diplomats and what have you. And now, not only that, but winding down means there are some legal text, agreements, protocols, treaties that have been signed with these countries. For instance, there is what is commonly called the headquarters agreement. So any headquarters or institution that is resident in any of the AES countries, they need to wind down, and those agreements need to be removed. You need to change a lot of things. There are monies that ECOWAS must have invested in some institutional programs and projects that needs to be calibrated. How much will these AES countries refund to ECOWAS? How much is ECOWAS expected to pay back to some of these countries their commitments to the larger bloc? So the movement or departure is not as simple as bye, 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 bye. No, it involves a lot of work. So there may have to be some committees at various levels, technical and at the summit level, to work out some of these details of how do we now engage the departure itself, staffing, administrative, institutional programs, projects that are ongoing. There are projects that ECOWAS has sourced for funding from somewhere else in these countries. Can we discontinue? What do we do? Alternative funding? So many things that are going to come up. I can tell you, even Mauritania that left in the year 2000, there are still some lingering issues between ECOWAS and Mauritania that are yet to be resolved up to this day.
All right, now just briefly, in a few seconds, what do you make of ECOWAS at 50?
Well, I think we need to celebrate ECOWAS at 50 because, one, for surviving as an institution 50 years after is great. Comparatively speaking, amongst the regional blocs set up by the African Union, then the OAU, ECOWAS stands very, very prominent amongst all of them, from IGAD to SADC to ECAS to EAS and the rest of them, Arab Maghreb Union. ECOWAS stands very, very clear that it has achieved much more than all of them, indeed even put together, in terms of programs and projects. It's coming rather sad that this development of the departure of the AES countries is coming at this verge of 50 years. Very, very unfortunate. And we wish it never was as West Africans. But these are things that we cannot possibly prevent from happening. But on the whole, yes, ECOWAS has existed. ECOWAS has recorded a lot of successes over the years. I wish also France, as a country, was not part of this sub-region. Perhaps the achievements of ECOWAS would have been tremendous without France, because something like a single currency would have been circulating within this sub-region without France. And that is a minus for us as a people. And I think going forward, 51 years after, we need to address the influence of France in West Africa.
All right, thank you so much, Ambassador Haruna Warakani, for your insights and takes on our conversation today. We've been looking at the DRC, the agreement with Rwanda, America's interest, and of course, Joseph Kabila's return to the DRC. What does it mean? And now, ECOWAS extraordinary summit to discuss the exit of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And of course, the 50th celebration coming up in May of the ECOWAS. And he's been giving us some insights into the conversation. Thank you again for joining us today. And that's it.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you.
And that's it on Africa Update this week. For more of our programs, documentaries, and news, do well to follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I am Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place next week.